Hello, everyone, and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. So, you may have seen that on my YouTube recently, on my community posts, I posted two vote polls called Have Your Say, where I asked you about your opinion about the latest two episodes of season 16. Well, I have collated all of the results and I'm going to turn it into this new video series called Have Your Say, where results of the poll with your opinions, and I'll also talk a bit about some drama that's been happening about season 16. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. So we're going to start off with a regular photo shoot that maybe some people just aren't as good at if they're not a look queen or something like that. I felt that this was a really good mixture of both photo shoot but also improv with some comedy as well. And obviously this is quite different to some of the mini challenges that we had in previous seasons, and I know some people have said they liked the old ones where queens got dunked in water and things like that, and I do understand. I do think that some of the newer mini challenges on the first episode, if it's just a regular photo shoot, it can be a little bit boring. So I'm glad they did switch it up for this season and they did something a little bit different with the kind of improv style that they did. One thing I did find interesting is that Plasma, who was on the second episode, so we'll talk about her in a minute, but she did tweet recently saying that for the entrance looks, the queens are actually told to wear an outfit that they don't mind getting dirty or wet. And I thought this was quite interesting because the queens obviously didn't get wet or dirty in this particular mini challenge. So I thought it was interesting that the queens are told to have an outfit of that style, because it might be that the queens deliberately wear something a little bit more pared down and simple, or something that they're still going to be able to move and perform in if they do get wet. But who knows if this is actually the case, but I did think it was just something to take into consideration when looking at people's entrance looks. And then back in the workroom, RuPaul comes in and tells her, and so this brings me on sort of to the idea of the original songs being a staple of the talent show. So we had 7 contestants and 5 of them did some form of original song. And this has become quite a big topic online, with some people asking whether original songs should still be allowed or whether they're boring and there's been too many of them. I think with this, original songs can be very, very successful, which we've seen with a lot of the contestants on this season and previous seasons. I just think the key is having a twist and having something a little bit different. Like, for example, last season with Anitra, she managed to blend having an original song that told us about her and her performances, but it also, she incorporated doing the sort of the duck walking, but also the chopping of the wood. And I think that's something that really stood out. And a lot of people still remember Anitra's talent show, and it's gone down in history as being one of the best ones ever. So I think you can do an original song and be successful, but there just needs to be sort of a twist to it. And in fact, a lot of the queens themselves did tweet about this and say that creating an original song is a lot more difficult than you realize. And this is true. If you think about it, the queens only get weeks to prepare for Drag Race, and they have to pay so much money for outfits, get it all sorted, designs, fittings, wigs, hair, shoes, everything. And then on top of that, they also need to think of a talent show. And unless you've got a real obvious talent that you can do, an original song, I can see why people would choose that. And it is very difficult to write, record, perform your own song. So I do think we need to give props to people for that, because it's not just as easy as going out and lip syncing to a track. It is something that requires a lot of time and effort. So moving on to the runway category for this week, which was Reveal Yourself. So an outfit with some kind of reveal to it. So first of all, we had Morphine Love Dion, who revealed from a towel into a swimsuit. Dawn was the next, and she revealed from a kind of Yeti Bride of the Abominable Snowman to a sort of another creature with these really long sleeves. A mandatory meeting revealed what she called a Lee Bowery skin suit into a kind of purple dominatrix. Tsunami Muse revealed from a red overcoat to a dress with feathered skirt, and then to another red leather corset. Q revealed a large black dress with feathers and then showed that the reverse side had brightly coloured pattern on it. Mirage revealed what the judges called a feather burrito dress into a kind of sparkly jumpsuit with a large breastplate. And last but not least, Saphira Crystal revealed from a large blue floor-length coat to a bodysuit, which also had a large breastplate and tassels. We then found out that the top two for that week really had the best mix of the best performance along with the best runways as well. And then in the lip sync in this fan voting. Question 3 was, who do you think in your opinion would have been eliminated this week? And we had Tsunami Muse with 66.8%. Then we had a mandatory meeting at 21.8%. And then Morphine Love Dion at 8.6%. The next question was, who do you think did the best in the actual challenge? And we had Safira Cristal, again, not surprising, with 45.8% of the vote. Then we had Q with 28.4, again, not that surprising. And then again, we had Mirage with 20.8. So I think this is a common theme that these three were seen as the top three in the performances. We then had question 5, which was who had the best runway this week? And on top, we had Q with 72.5%. Then we had Dawn with 14%. And then we had Mirage with 8.1%. And I do agree with this. I thought Dawn did really well throughout the episode, but I do think she really stood out in the runway category because her runway was just so detailed and so cool and really intricate. With also had a kind of campy, very odd style to it, which is very much what Dawn is. And then finally, question 6 was, who do you think is the front runner for the season based on this episode? And we had, unsurprisingly, Safira Cristal with 58.3%, Q with 28.4%, and then Dawn with 9.3%. And I think this is quite logical and it does align with the rest of the votes. And then the final section of the vote was if you had any comments. Unfortunately, I can't read out all of your comments because there were quite a few. But in general, I looked through and tried to find ones that had a general similarity and theme to them. A lot of people were saying that they felt that Safira and Q definitely deserved top 2. So I think that was very common across all of the comments. Another comment that came up quite a lot was that people felt that Mirage should have been probably top 2 or at least top 3. And I think this is probably because Michelle did make a comment at one point saying that Mirage's performance in the talent show was a little bit sort of sloppy. And a lot of people were saying that that was unfair and that Mirage actually was really polished and deserved a high placement. And this came up quite a few times in the comments. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people said that they're a little bit sick of original songs and that perhaps original songs shouldn't be allowed anymore as a talent because we've seen it so many times on Drag Race now. So this is a kind of ongoing topic and we'll have to see whether this keeps on going for other seasons beyond season 16 or not. And interestingly, a lot of the other comments were about a mandatory meeting because she did get quite harshly critiqued for her main stage runway, which I can kind of see. I think it was mainly to do with the makeup, I think. And there was obviously the wig. The queens were being slightly shady towards Amanda and saying that she sort of wasn't very polished. But a lot of the comments said that they really like Amanda and they're not sure whether the edit is trying to set her up as being the kind of the messy queen, even though from what we saw other of her, she's not really that messy. But people were saying that the edit was maybe slightly shady. And I did talk about this in my previous Roscoe's recap for last week, so I'll put a link to you can go and check that out. But other queens have also said the same thing, that perhaps the edit is being slightly unkind to Amanda in this episode and trying to show her as being like the messy one, even though her personality is great. And then moving on to a little bit of drama that happened from this episode. So after the episode came out, Q tweeted saying that, quote, some of these Drag Race alums are real funny with all these critiques when they look like the Mucinex man on their original season, some of y'all as toxic as the fans. And just in case you don't know, Mucinex is a type of cold and flu medicine, I believe, and you take it to sort of loosen the mucus in your throat. I know, kind of gross. And then the Mucinex man is this kind of blob of mucus, and he's sort of the logo of the brand. And so I think what Q is saying is that some of the Drag Race alums, probably the alums who have review shows, recap shows, things like that, have criticized, and Q is saying, well, a lot of the alums on their original seasons looked bad, like the Mucinex man. So Q is kind of calling that out. Although Q didn't really say who she was talking about. If you look at the comments on Twitter, there were quite a lot of theories as to who she was going to be talking about. I'm not going to talk about that here because I think that's too much of a sort of a guess, but I think she probably was talking about more than one person who may or may not have a review show talking about Drag Race, critiquing queens, things like that. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure. Maybe Q was just saying this to get a little bit of drama. Who knows? But we'll see if any further developments come from this. Okay, so we're now going to move on to episode 2 and the second premiere. Okay, so the queens for this premiere in order of their entrances were Hershey LaCour from Los Angeles, California, Plasma from New York, Geneva Carr, who was born in Mexico and now lives in Brownsville, Texas, Plain Jane from Boston, Massachusetts, Megami from Brooklyn, New York, Maya Iman LePage from Miami, Florida, and Nymphia Wind from Brooklyn, New York. Similar to the first premiere, the queens did a kind of photo shoot, but this time it was called the SheMV, which is a play on the DMV, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles in America, which is the government agency that looks after driver's licenses and vehicle registrations. And this was also a kind of improv, but also more of a kind of photo shoot, and RuPaul and T.S. Madison were there. I do think that this setup was maybe slightly less interesting than the first mini challenge we had, because I think the queens were a bit more limited in terms of what they could actually do. It was basically just a photo shoot and then trying to make RuPaul laugh by doing whatever you could. But it just felt maybe slightly more limited than the first one, which had a lot more props and a lot more things that you could do with it. Overall, I think all the queens did pretty well. I think to me, Nymphia Wind and Geneva Carr probably did the best in terms of standing out and taking the best picture. But to me, the funniest part was when Maya fell asleep, which I thought was so funny because we haven't really seen that happen in a mini challenge. Obviously, we've had people like Jigs Monsoon who had narcolepsy before, but we've never really seen someone fall asleep actually during a challenge. So I thought that was just really funny. And I thought she played it off really well. And it was definitely a highlight of that mini challenge for me. And so moving on, we had a talent show, surprise, surprise, same as the first episode. But this one, instead of being the MTV Spring Break thing, this was the Queen Choice Award, which is obviously a play on the Teen Choice Award. And so I'm going to talk about each queen's talent in order in which they performed. So first of all, we had Geneva Carr, who did a kind of original song, but with a little bit of dance as well. And I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really funny. She came right out the gate by saying, I cleared customs, which I thought was really funny, and RuPaul and everyone laughed. I thought her song was maybe one of the catchiest with the like La Diva Más Latina. I thought that was such a funny, interesting line that she kept repeating. And it did sound like a really catchy song that you could imagine being played in the clubs. We then had Hershey LaCour, who did another original song. I thought the song was really fun. It was called Whiplash, and she did a lot of kind of comedy, whipping her hair back and forward. I do agree with some of the critiques of I don't know why she was in the jungle. I think they did say on the pit stop for this week, they did wonder why she was wearing these kind of short, like khaki shorts that were quite sort of loose and not that well fitting, and it looked like it was going to be a reveal, and I actually agree. I thought it was going to be a reveal as well, and then nothing really happened with it. So overall, it was an interesting song, but maybe just lacked a little bit of oomph for me. We then had Plasma, who did an original song, but also some impressions. I thought the original song was really fun. She's got a great voice, clearly, very talented in that regard. I thought the impressions were fine, but I do agree with the judges that it just felt a little bit rushed and trying to pack too much in. I think it would have been better if maybe she had just picked just the singing and maybe made it a bit funny or had something a little bit extra. But I do think the impressions did take away a little bit from the performance because it didn't quite flow as well. But overall, still a very good performance, still obviously very talented. We then had Nymphia Wind, who did dance. I really loved this. It was such a good performance. She clearly knows what she's doing, like beautiful dancing. Obviously, it was also very much to do with her culture coming from Taiwan. I thought the sleeveography, whatever you want to call it with the sleeves, I thought that was so cool. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of when, if you remember from All Stars 4, when Gia Gunn did also a sort of similar style of dancing from her culture, from Japanese culture, I believe it was. And I do think that was really interesting, and it does show a definite talent. And a little, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but I do think that Nymphia wasn't given the credit that she deserved for that performance. And many people have also said that Gia Gunn should have got more credit and potentially won for that challenge on All Stars 4. So I think there's definitely some similarities between their run in this particular episode. Next up, we had Megami, who did a lip sync, and she sort of did this thing where there was an easel with some cards on it, and it was very much to do with sort of LGBT plus rights, representation, and things like that. I do agree with the judges that it did feel like, although it was a very important message, and I loved that, and I thought it was very powerful, it did kind of just feel a bit like a normal lip sync. I think that maybe there could have been a few more props. Like if she was going to turn around the cards on the easel, she should have done it sooner. Because like Michelle said, we were kind of just looking at the easel the whole time. And it just unfortunately fell a little bit flat. There wasn't necessarily anything really unique about it other than that it was just a powerful message. So unfortunately, I will have to say, although I love the message, it wasn't my favorite. We then had Maya Iman LePage, who did a kind of lip sync, but also acrobatics. And this was just amazing. I thought it was so cool. She was doing lots of tricks, flips. She flipped up sort of onto this table, which was quite reminiscent, I thought, of Kennedy Davenport on All Stars 3. And I thought that was such a gag. I can barely touch my toes without breaking my back. So I'm very much in awe of her. I thought she was so cool. And I thought that's obviously what she's known for. And I thought she showed it off beautifully. And then finally, we had Plain Jane, who did an original song called Burger Fingers, where she kind of was wearing this burger and then tore it off and she had a large breastplate. The end gag was that she had ketchup and mustard bottles and she just sort of squeezed it continuously onto the breastplate for a long time. And it was sort of like an awkward but funny silence. I do think this was a fun original song, but in my opinion, although it was good, I do think that, I mean, RuPaul was laughing her head off about it. I do think maybe I didn't find it as funny as RuPaul did. I thought it was good, but it maybe wasn't as funny as other people thought it was, in my opinion. It was still a very good performance, though, very clean. And I thought it was definitely refreshing that she was doing something a little bit different for an original song. So moving on to the runway for this week, and the category was Made You Look, which again was kind of basically a reveal. And so first up, we had Nymphia Wind, who started off with a large unripe banana, and then underneath she had a yellow banana dress. And then under that was a kind of more mature, ripened banana. And then finally, she revealed these kind of brown, overripe bananas. Then we had Hershey Le Courgette, who revealed from a kind of large ruffle coat to then underneath was a fitted chocolate-covered leather dress with large shoulder puffs. Plasma was next, and she started off as a tomato pin cushion, which was inspired apparently by her grandmother, who was a seamstress, and then she revealed to a kind of jumpsuit underneath with tassels. Then we had Maya Iman LePage, who started off in a large jacket and then revealed to a swimsuit underneath. Geneva Carr was next, and she started off in a kind of mariachi-style man's suit, and then it transformed into a dress, and she described it as changing from Mario to Maria. Next up was Megami, and she said that her name means goddess, so she came out as this goddess, and she had the eyes on her hands, which for those of you who don't know is a reference to the 2006 movie Pan's Labyrinth, and one of the characters in the movie was this sort of monster who had eyes on their hands. And Megami later revealed that her reveal for this runway was the eyes on the hands. And then finally, Plain Jane started off in what she described as a Romanov-style blue dress robe because of her Russian heritage. And then underneath, she was wearing this outfit that she described as a, quote, big-titted Boston bimbo. So the top two for this week were Geneva Carr and Plain Jane. And I think I can see why, in a way, those two were tops, because I felt they were very good in their performances. But I mean, we'll get onto this in a minute, but I do think, and I was very surprised that Nymphia Wind was not in the top two. I don't know which one of the top two I would have kicked out for Nymphia. I can't really decide, but definitely I thought Nymphia deserved top placement in my opinion. I thought her looks were all great and I thought her performance was also great. So I was a little bit surprised that Nymphia wasn't in the top two, I'll be honest. But I still thought that Plain Jane and Geneva Carr did very well in their performances. So I think they were definitely deserved as being high placements. So moving on to the subscriber vote, the Have Your Say, we've got the first question, which was, do you agree with the outcome of this week's episode? So tops, bottoms, and elimination. And we had yes only had 24.4%, whereas no had 75.6%. So very much people did not agree with the outcome of this episode. So following up, we had question 2, which was, who do you think should have won this week? And unsurprisingly, we had 69.2% Nymphia Wind. So kind of what I said earlier. Then we had Plain Jane at 22.6%. And then, interestingly, we had Plasma with 3%. I do think Plasma did extremely well. I did think her talent was great, although I did say maybe slightly convoluted. But I thought it was interesting to see that Plasma was actually pretty high up on this list compared to some of the others. Even though I think she deserved it, I thought perhaps, in my opinion, Geneva Carr, I did really like her performance, so I can kind of see that why she was top 2. So question 3 was, in your opinion, who should have been eliminated this week? And we had Megami, which maybe unsurprisingly with 76%. I think this was perhaps because her reveal just didn't really reveal too much, or even though the outfit I thought was stunning and the detail was amazing, the reveal of the hands didn't really work because she kind of had her eyes open anyway and then revealed to the hands, so it just didn't quite match. And like I said, I thought her lip sync was powerful, but maybe didn't quite have enough of an edge to be that interesting, although I thought the messaging was really good. So anyway, and then after that, we had Maya Iman LePage with 7.7%. Again, I think because of the critique she had because of her runway, and not so much the talent show, more the runway. I think maybe that's why she's there. And then Hershey LaCourtier with 7.1%. Again, I think because her talent show was critiqued slightly for not quite having enough oomph to it. So then we had question 4, which was, who do you think was the best in the challenge this week? And unsurprisingly, we had Nymphia Wind with 71.9%, so the vast majority, and I agree with that. We then had Plain Jane with 13.3%, and then Geneva Carr with 5.7%, which I thought was definitely deserved. And I thought that's quite interesting that I said earlier in the other question that Plasma was quite high, whereas in this vote, Geneva was quite high. So it might be that people felt that Plasma's look pushed her up a little bit, potentially. And then question 5 was, in your opinion, who had the best runway look this week? And again, unsurprisingly, 62.3% said Nymphia Wind, which I definitely agree with. I thought the multiple banana reveals, not only was it fun and kooky and obviously her style of that she loves bananas and that's her thing, but I also thought that it just looked so great and it was very polished. Plain Jane was 12.6%, maybe unsurprisingly. And then again, we have Plasma at 12.4%. So I think people really liked her look. And I can see why. I thought it looked extremely well made and very polished. So I can see why she was quite high in terms of the runway this week. And then finally, we had question 6, which was, who do you think is the front runner of the season based on this episode? And unsurprisingly, we had 70.3% vote for Nymphia Wind, 24.7% for Plain Jane, and 2.3% for Geneva Carr. So this is that's probably the way I would have voted for it. I would have had Nymphia top and then Plain Jane and Geneva somewhere in number 2 and 3. So I do definitely agree with that. In terms of the comments for this was quite a varied comment section on this poll, I will say. As you can imagine, the majority of comments were just saying that Nymphia was robbed, Nymphia should have been top 2, Nymphia should have won. And I do definitely agree. I'm very baffled as to why Nymphia was not in the top 2, but I can see that was a lot of people had that opinion. There were also, unsurprisingly, lots of comments about Plain Jane. So as we saw in the episode, Plain Jane definitely was potentially sort of being the villain of the season, and she was making some quite sort of shady comments about the other contestants. And then I think the thing that really did it was Plain Jane, for the Rater Queen, she flipped it on its head and she put the top queen at the bottom placement and then did it the other way around. So she did it very much strategically, even though she told everyone else that she kind of wasn't going to do that. But what I thought was really interesting is a lot of people were very split on Plain Jane. A lot of people in the comments said that they really liked her and thought that she's bringing the drama. She's kind of doing what she's allowed to do within the rules of the competition. And she's, bringing some sort of intrigue to the season, almost a bit like on the older seasons. But then there were a lot of other people who said that they didn't really like Jane. They didn't like her attitude and they felt like she was being unnecessarily mean because she wanted screen time. So I think we're going to have to see how Plain Jane interacts once all the cast come together, and whether she's going to sort of continue having the same attitude and giving us this same sort of drama throughout the rest of the season. And speaking of that, there was one interesting thing I saw on Twitter, which was maybe a little bit of sort of drama. As you may remember, back on season 15, so last season, we had Mistress Isabel Brooks, who a lot of people have kind of drawn similarities between Mistress and Plain Jane because they're both kind of the villains so far of the season. And Mistress actually tweeted about this seemingly and said, "Okay, time to report and get her accounts deleted," with a smiley face. And this is seemingly in reference to the fact that, as you may remember, I did talk about it on my channel, back on season 15, Mistress's account on Instagram kept getting banned and reported multiple times because lots of fans were reporting her account for sort of bullying because some of the comments that Mistress was making on the show. And Mistress kept having her account taken away from her or suspended. And so Mistress, I think, is making the point that if that happened to her, then it should also happen to Plain Jane. But this isn't clear whether this was just a joke. I'm not sure if Mistress actually means that or if that's just Mistress being Mistress, as we all know and love. But I do think this has started quite a wider debate about how queens are treated on different seasons. But you can obviously form your own opinion on that part of it. There was also another slight bit of drama that happened. So on the pit stop, which I mentioned earlier, which was hosted by Trixie Mattel, the guest this week was Brittany Broski, who some of you may know as the kombucha meme girl. And she's now become a sort of influencer, a comedian online. She's got millions of followers. She was the guest this week because her and Trixie Mattel have collaborated a lot. I think they're quite good friends in real life. And when they were talking about Plain Jane's performance and Plain Jane in general, Brittany said that Plain Jane's performance with the big breastplate was quite reminiscent of what Jimbo does. And basically, Brittany said that Plain Jane is a bit like Jimbo, but not as good as Jimbo. And it looks like Plain Jane responded to this on Twitter. And Plain Jane tweeted saying, "Let's get one thing clear at Brittany Broski. I'm not, quote, Jimbo, but not as good. I'm Crystal Versace, but not as good. Thank you." And it's not clear whether this was a joke by Plain Jane or whether she was just kind of leaning into the drama because it's just a bit of fun. I don't know. Or whether she was genuinely annoyed by the comparison with Jimbo, because this has been said by a few other people online with people comparing Plain Jane with Jimbo, but saying that Plain Jane is not as good as Jimbo. So we'll have to wait and see if this is talked about again and if there are any further developments on this. So there you go. There was my Have Your Say video where I recapped season 16, episodes 1 and 2. I also talked about a little bit of drama, and I also revealed the results of the poll with your opinions about the episode. Let me know in the comments if you agreed with the poll results and what you thought of the episodes and who you think should have been in the top and the bottom. Also, let me know if you like this style of video with me kind of recapping the episodes and also talking about the vote and the results and kind of getting, I guess, a test of what people think about the episodes and the outcome. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me again for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets, and drama. Thank you for watching. Bye! And as always, I'd like to say thank you so much to all of my Patreon members. You are just absolute legends, and I really appreciate your support. In the You're a Winner Baby tier, we have Rochelle, Emerald1508, PC Smush, Kristen, and Ethan. And in the Shantae You Stay tier, we have Charlie, David, Becky, Craig, Max, Kylie, Amy, and Linda. Thank you so much for all of your ongoing support. You really are absolute legends. I love having you as my Patreons. It really does make such a difference to me. So thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to support my channel and join my Patreon, you'll get early access to my videos as well as a raft of other amazing benefits. And if you want to support my channel and get those benefits, I'll put a link in my description so you can join my Patreon today. Please make sure you like, comment, and share this video as it really helps support my channel. And of course, please make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date about new uploads. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!